of oligarchical benefactors to the Occupy Wall Street. Why? Because they want this larger world government system built on the idea of social justice, of a way to get justice for groups that are not represented. But when you go back for decades, for instance, if you read Webster Tarpley's Obama unauthorized biography, you see how he's a product of a number of extremist groups who are, again, trying to punch these buttons. And in many cases, it goes back to what the Ford Foundation was trying to do, giving grants specifically to radical groups, denying grants to more mainstream groups that at least are not seeking violence. Right. And you got people like McGeorge Bundy, the Skull and Bones acolyte, pushing these programs through big money foundations like the Ford Foundation.
Well, it's incredible. When they do it, it's okay, right? But when somebody else tries to actually de-escalate and speak out for basic justice, basic liberty, basic common law in America, they're labeled sovereign citizens, which is now being equated with terrorism. Common sense has been thrown out the window, and just the basic facts have been thrown out the window. For example, Zimmerman, he's not white. I mean, he's not a white guy.
But they want to start a race war where the average white person's a honky, but the elitists at Skull and Bones who are steering the whole mechanism, they're not a honky, you know.
We got to go to break, Aaron.
Use the term, but
I know. No, you're using it. You're paraphrasing it.
Get along.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Patrick. We'll be right back. Stay with us on the Alex Jones Show. A lot more straight ahead. Stay with us. Continuing our interview with Patrick Henningsen, the Infowars.com reporter. This is Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, filling in for Alex today, in case you were wondering. This just in, Santorum suspends GOP presidential campaign. So, Rick Santorum is out of the race, clearing the path for Mitt Romney to become the nominee. Yeah, after they stole it from Ron Paul. I mean, let's be honest about it. As long as we're telling the truth, you know, Zimmerman isn't white, and they stole the election from Ron Paul. There you go, for the record. But continuing with Patrick Henningsen, we are talking about the escalation of the race war in America, who benefits from that escalation, and why we must resist it. Because remember, our buttons are being pushed, all of us. White people, black people, brown people, no matter what your race or color, the global elite is messing with your head. If you feel angry about this whole situation, you have been manipulated. So you have to resist that, chill out, calm down, and realize that it's all about us working together as people to resist tyranny and not allowing that tyranny to make us fight against each other. Patrick, I'd like to have your thoughts on that topic, actually.
Yeah, Mike, I just want to point out that before this whole Trayvon Martin shooting media circus began, you know, things like the neo-Nazi or the white supremacist movement it was just about dead and buried. You know, it was on a life support system. And what the left-leaning media and the Al Sharptons and the Barack Obama and the Jeremiah Wrights of the world have done is they've resuscitated the white supremacist movement and somehow made it kind of sexy for the lowest common denominator of society. Likewise, the new Black Panther movement has no appeal to really anybody in today's modern America. But sure enough, after this circus, they've now kind of risen up to have some people listening to them, and they are getting some credence in very sort of dark and moldy circles. But you know, this is a typical kind of controlled cutout, two sides of a cardboard cutout. You have the National Socialist movement on one side, New Black Panthers on the other, and I will bet you the house that both of those movements have a federal informant steering their media operations and so forth.
Oh, you bet.
Right there at the top of their organization.
Yeah.
And if any Americans learn one thing from this is to understand that point.
You're exactly right. This is racial escalation theater. I'm not talking about the shooting itself. That was obviously a real event. The shooting did take place, but everything that surrounds that, the context that they're building around it, the escalation, the words that they're putting out there, the poison in the minds of the people. This is racial escalation theater taking place. Is there any other evidence, Patrick, that there are FBI informants or other sort of controllers that are steering groups, that specific details that you know of right now?
I can't say for certain, but all I can do is I can look at history and I can read these reports about the weather underground. I mean, it's quite likely, and a lot of people don't talk about this, but Bill Ayers, if you look at his MO and you look at the MO of the weather underground, Bill Ayers is anything but a radical leftist. Bill Ayers looks to me like he was a career federal informant, because otherwise he'd be in a federal penitentiary right now doing back-to-back life sentences. So let's get real. And most of these sort of radical guys who are allowed to be big media personalities are protected under the federal informant cloak, so to speak. But, you know, there's another more disturbing trend. Okay, and this is a foundation-funded thing. On PBS, I watched a show called Finding Your Roots. And there was a black professor with a white and a black classroom, and they were talking about the founding fathers, and they were basically focusing on the fact that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and these guys were slave owners. And then they were going to the black students and saying, well, what do you think about this? And the black students were saying, well, that means they're part of the problem. You know, and we thought the Constitution was this and the Constitution was that. But these are children being manipulated by academics and foundation-funded older people to make them say, throw out the Constitution, throw out the law of the land. And that's something that this federal government and the one before it under George W. Bush, make no mistake, has been working to minimize the influence of the Constitution within the greater society of the United States and applying to laws.
What's astonishing to this, to me, in all this, Patrick, is that they have taken this one event, which is tragic, of course, as any loss of life is tragic, but in the bigger context, it is tiny compared to the number of lives lost every single day by just prescription drugs, for example, or soldiers committing suicide because they're on psychiatric drugs.
Or taser guns.
Yeah, right. So it's all out of context. They don't have the priorities straight about what's really killing Americans.
We're all victims of a police state, every one of us.
Absolutely. Patrick, I want to thank you for joining us today. Really great talking with you here. And folks, watch for Patrick Henningsen's articles on Infowars.com. We'll be right back with a lot more here on The Alex Jones Show. Stay with us. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
We're on the march. The empire's on the...
Let me hit you with some good news in all of this. If you've been listening and you're a regular Infowars, Alex Jones Show listener or reader, you know things seem kind of crazy in the world out there, but the good news in all of this is that the desperation of the system shows that we are winning. Why do they have to resort to this race war escalation? Why do they have to resort to the fabrication of fake news? Why do they have to resort to the fake science, to the dumbing down, the chemical drugging, the chemical lobotomizing of our children with vaccines and fluoride and GMOs? Why do they have to do that? The answer is because we're winning. Truth is winning. Enlightenment is winning. People are waking up. You know, truth is more powerful than fiction. Light is more powerful than darkness. God is more powerful than the devil, to use that metaphor. And the information that we are uncovering here and reporting and bringing to you every day here on the Infowars.com team is the kind of information that's going to set humanity free. It's the kind of information that's going to allow humanity to attain that higher spiritual awareness and achievement, to be free from the bonds of tyranny, to be free from being enslaved and oppressed by governments and in other organizations that have operated throughout history. Of course, governments being the most dangerous of all. But light will win over darkness. Truth will win over fiction and lies and deception. And that's why they're so desperate. So when you see these tactics being used, just remember, in your mind, just remember that this is evidence that we are winning the fight for true freedom and liberty and justice for all of us and our children, all our future. Now, one of the side effects of this growing police state is that we, as the free individuals of America or wherever you're listening from, we will have more interaction with police and law enforcement. That interaction needs to be handled very, very carefully in order to keep yourself out of jail, to not have an arrest record, because just an arrest record, even if you're not guilty of anything, just the record of being arrested can ruin your life. And here to talk to us about that is Dale Carson. He's the author of this book, Arrest Proof Yourself. I'll give you a little more intro here. He is a former FBI agent, former law enforcement in South Miami. He's a very knowledgeable individual. He now runs a defense law practice in Florida. and he joins us to talk about how we can interface with law enforcement in an intelligent way that protects our rights, asserts our rights, but doesn't escalate the situation. And I believe he's joining us by Skype video. Do we have Dale on Skype audio?
We're still working on the video here.
All right, Dale. It's good to have you with us via Skype audio. Good to have you on the show, man. How you doing?
I'm doing real well. I got dressed up today, and now you can't see me, so there you go.
Well, we've got a still picture of you on there, and you look dressed up there, too, so it's all good.
Good.
Well, okay, we talked about this interface with police. I think in your book, Arrest Proof Yourself, you opened my eyes. I read this book and was just blown away. You talk about how people are always interacting with police in ways that they're not even aware of. What are the most important points that people need to know right now when they're out driving around that they may not be aware of?
Good manners. Good manners.
Good manners.
Always good manners. There's no replacement for that. I think one of the keys is that as youngsters, we learn that law enforcement's here to help us. There's officer friendly, a number of groups that try to convince us that law enforcement is helpful. Now, in an absolute crisis, I don't think there's any question that they are helpful. But in anything other than an absolute crisis, they are there to put you in jail. And if you can understand that, if you can put your arms around that very concept, then you realize, and jail's a bad place. Being arrested's a bad place. If you can put your arms around that, you understand the dynamic. And then when you see law enforcement, you appreciate the fact that with little effort, they can put you in jail. That's what they're trained to do. That's what they get promoted internally based on, the number of arrests that they make. So when you see them, it should make the hair on the back of your head stand up.
Now, when you talk about these tally sheets that law enforcement uses to advance their career, and while they may say it's not a quota system, it is a tally sheet where they mark down how many felony arrests, how many non-felony arrests, and so on. You also talk about how when they are stopping your vehicle, they don't really care about writing traffic tickets. They're there to stop your vehicle to look for a possible felony arrest, right?
That's exactly right. And most arrests that we see certainly here in my law office are from car stops. I had a young fellow who was stopped yesterday. The officer walked up to the car, smelled marijuana emanating from the interior of the car, and as a result of that, he asked the individual to step out of the car, and then he began a search. Now, that's illegal. I say that's illegal. That's not permitted under current federal law, just to search someone's car without either consent or a search warrant. But as a practical matter, when that happens in the field, who's there to contest that?
Right.
I mean, the individual who's arrested certainly has a vested interest in saying, wait, it wasn't me. I never authorized the search. But of course, the courts are disinclined, as I think jurors are as well, to believe the words coming out of the mouth of an individual who's been stopped for a criminal violation. And it's odd when you think about it. We know carrying dope in the car with us, cocaine or heroin or oxycodone or roxicodone, however it's termed, we know that's illegal. People do it anyway.
But let me ask you this. Sorry to interrupt, but isn't it true that if you have a friend who is on a powerful psychiatric drug or a powerful narcotic painkiller, and that friend rides in the passenger seat of your car, and they've got their pills with them in their prescription bottle, and they drop a pill accidentally under the seat, then if you're later driving by yourself, a cop pulls you over, asks, do you mind if I look in your vehicle? You don't have weapons, do you? You say, no, go ahead. You're consenting to a search. The cop finds that pill. You go to jail for felony possession of illegal substances, right?
That's 100% correct, yes. That's right. So you're not going to have an explanation. You don't even know it was there. So the key to this is to not consent to a search, because with absent consent, the law enforcement officer has to obtain a search warrant.
So how do you do that?
They may say the way a search warrant's gathered is you have to take information in the form of an affidavit. You take that to a neutral magistrate, a judge. The judge looks at the information you have and then makes a determination as to whether or not they're going to issue a search warrant.
No, I mean, how do you as the driver say no politely so that you're not consenting to a search? How you have a recipe?
I've been around for a number of years, officer, and